I'm gonna show you how to take a bandsaw from this to this for about 15 bucks. Check it out. So this is my big Mitering metal cutting bandsaw, and it's extremely accurate and really a pleasure to use. I use this in conjunction with my other Benchtop Mitering bandsaw to cut steel tube and aluminum and metal tube in general. Now, super accurate, like I said, but it's not easy to line the cut line up exactly where I want. Now, on my other saws that I'm typically using, my miter saws, I have what's called a shadow cut line. And it's basically by having an LED light casting down on the center of the blade, it telegraphs the exact kerf of the blade to whatever material you're going to cut. So it makes the saws extremely accurate and very easy to know that you're getting exactly what you want out of a cut at any given time. Now, the one on my wood saw in my wood shop, I actually modified in a previous video a few years ago, but now most saws kind of include that. And I wanted to have something like that on my metal cutting saw. I tried a couple of options. One was using like a green laser, but I found the kerf of the laser was just too big. And then I came across this $15 LED magnetic base light on Amazon. This is one of those things that's so simple, I can't believe I went years without doing it, and I can't believe that no other saw company has figured out a way to integrate this onto bandsaws. So let me show you how it works on this big saw and also my benchtop saw, and you can see how something like this might absolutely change the accuracy of your work for about 15 bucks. So since I'm already standing by the big saw, I'll show you how I'm using it here. Now, this is a magnetic base. Obviously needs to stick to a piece of steel. The casting on this saw is aluminum, so it won't stick to the casting, but my guide block is steel. So I literally just stick it here, and then it has this sort of gooseneck, you know, a little adjustable gooseneck, and you can set it to exactly where you want it to be. And I'll bring you in close so you can see the way the distance of this light affects the shadow line you see, but it really is basically as simple as this. So here you can see what the saw looks like with the light off. Now, obviously I can see the material really well, but I have no idea where this blade's gonna land. Now, if I turn the light on, it's casting a direct shadow of the blade kerf right down onto the material. So I can see exactly where that blade is gonna go down and hit the material. And if I move the light up, the shadow will actually get a little bit crisper. And if I move the light closer, it actually blurs it out, but it becomes a little more of like kind of a one side or the other. So you wanna just adjust the distance the light is from the material to get the most compelling line, the one that works best for you. And it's honestly really easy to adjust. It might seem finicky on video, but it takes just a second to make sure that I'm telegraphing correctly. And then from there, essentially I can move my material to exactly where I need to cut, and I can lock in my vise and make a cut. I'll show you it on a few different pieces of material. So right here, you can see the two types of lines that are typically on a piece of tube steel that I'm cutting. One of them is done with a regular pencil, and one of them is done with like a silver streak pencil. Now, this is 1.5 by 1.5 square tube, but obviously I cut a variety of different things. And with my normal bandsaw blade setup, the way that I line up my cut is I essentially bring down my blade and I try to kind of like line up the teeth to exactly where I gotta be. And then once I get it exactly where I think I need to be, lining it up, I lock the drop, and then I lock in the vise like this. And then I go ahead and I make my cut. Now, in this application where I've got a nice square piece of tube, it's not that hard, but it's not very fast, and it's truly not that accurate. So with this little upgrade, let me show you how much faster I can do that and how much more accurately. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm putting a shadow line directly down the blade, which is adjustable. I can literally make sure that I get it perfectly square. And then with that shadow line, if I were to move my stock around, I can line it up exactly where my cut line is or anywhere on the material, and I don't have to fuss around with the blade actually touching the material. And then once I get it exactly where I want to be, let's say I want to cut on this pencil line, I line it up, lock in my vise, turn on my saw, and just like that, cut the material. And if I want to cut the next piece, I can just bring the blade up a little bit, move it over, get that shadow line lined up, and keep cutting. Now, obviously, this is telegraphing directly down onto the blade. So if I wanted to cut a 45, I just released the pin on my saw, or any angle. I can literally just turn the saw. I can lock it in place. I can lock the fence. We can check. Let's say I want to cut this right to the edge of the material. I want to save as much material as I can. Can lock that in place. Turn on the saw. Now this works not only on square tube, but I could pull this out. I could put a piece of round tube in there. You can see I get a really nice shadow line, same exact thing. And put a bigger piece of tube in there. Now the key here is that the blade needs to be close down to the material. If I raise it up, I lose that shadow because it's just not telegraphing down. But that's all right because I just basically lower my blade down. I kind of lock it in place. On this saw in particular, this is the big saw. I'll show you on the small saw as well. But on the big saw, I lock it in place and then I can keep my vise a little bit loose, position my material exactly where I need it to be. If that's where I want to be, can then make my cut. And keep moving. So after seeing it on a bunch of different pieces of tube, you can also imagine how nicely it would work on a piece of plate. So here what I can do is basically bring down the blade, and now I've got a perfectly telegraphed line, all in shadow right there. That's not drawn on the material in any way. And I know exactly where this is going to telegraph across. I can line it up with a Sharpie line. I can line it up with a pencil line. And like I mentioned, if I wanted to, I could miter the saw and I'd be able to see exactly where my blade is going to go, which just really, really is going to help me improve my accuracy overall. Let me show you how this works on a much smaller, a little more consumer grade version of this. So this is my Wen benchtop mitering bandsaw. I've made some videos about this and I actually think this is a really great tool. I prefer this over the different kind of consumer sized metal cutting saws just because it can handle such a large variety of material. But I have basically the same problem here. It's a little hard for me to see exactly where my cut's going to be because there isn't really any way to telegraph it down directly onto my material. Now using the same light, I can basically just stick it to the saw and do the exact same thing. And it can be modular between the two saws, so I really only need to have one light. Now this saw actually has a little metal plate here on the side. I can stick the light right there, and then I can just sort of gooseneck it over, and just like that, with a little bit of adjustment, it's set up and ready to go. So it's actually like the exact same process, basically just lining up my light so that I'm getting a nice telegraph line down onto my material. And then basically what will happen is as you shift the light to the left and the right, you'll be able to kind of better understand exactly the way it's lined up. But once I get it set up, I can basically use this to take material, line it up in my saw. I just have to keep my blade nice and close to the material while I get it set up. And then once I have it set up, I can lock in my vise, turn on my saw, and make a cut. Now, similarly to the big saw, this also works really well on round material, and it works on miters. So with a round bar, I can basically put that in there. You can see, of course, the arm of this is in the way. You can see the way that shadow line transmits right onto the tube. Now, if I turn it off, you can see the difference. I can't really see, I mean, I know generally where I'm gonna cut, but it's just not as fast as lining it up with that perfect transmitted line. And also, because this is all attached to the saw head itself, if I go ahead and miter in any way, I can use that same exact shadow line to see exactly where my saw kerf's going to be, and it telegraphs around the material perfectly straight, which is nice on round tube. It's so simple. I can't believe that I'm the first one that figured this out. So there really isn't much to this. It's a $15 LED light. What I like about it is that it's got a cord attached to it. Some of these are like USB. It does have the magnetic base, which is great. And I found that the gooseneck is just perfect. It's not too bulky, not too big. The only criticism I will have is the cord is a little bit short. So I ordered some 3-foot long extension cords just to have it. And I did get a second one for this and one for my other saw. You could definitely use this in a bunch of other applications, and I'd love to see how other people use it. So leave a comment down below. I'll also put links down below in the description and a link in the pinned comment onto where you can get this for the 15 bucks. I think it's totally worth it. It's a big upgrade for even this benchtop saw and a huge upgrade for my big mitering saw. If you enjoyed this, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and follow me right here on Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.